And now this is where our active weather watch begins. We're going to focus in Ontario here, just a few minutes to 9 a.m. in Toronto. And this is exactly where the rain is moving through and the very strong winds as well. As we look at the radar, see this line of storms that's passing through? This here is the cold front that's heading through Ontario. The winds coming out of the southwest, very strong. We do have wind warnings in place for some gusts over 100 kilometers an hour along the shores of Huron here in Ripley, Ontario. That is close to King Carden. We've seen a roof be ripped right off of a barn. Now, Mark Robinson is down through southwestern Ontario, and here's the latest from Kevin. Yeah, you can just hear the roar of the winds out there. Kevin in southern Ontario and the GTA will also be checking in with Mark Robinson as well. But you can see here the special weather statements in place widespread throughout southern Ontario. And the wind warnings now, well, they go all the way up to Killbear Provincial Park, down towards London, Ontario as well. Really watching as that cold front continues to push through the GTA for some very strong winds. And the rain accompanied with that as well. So this is your cold front here. And as it continues to pass through, this is where we are expecting to see the showers. The future radar, though, you can see by the time we are into the afternoon, all of that continues to move further east, and we will be in the clear. But for the morning here, we're watching out for some thunderstorms, especially along the lake shores here, and those wind gusts. If you're just tuning in right now, southern Ontario is seeing some wind warnings for about 100 kilometers per hour. Now, when we talk about the rain here, the rain is really going to be just a morning story, as this is all going to clear out through southern Ontario into the afternoon, but it will move through Montreal and eventually head into the Atlantic as well. But you can see we're not tracking huge rainfall totals, about 10 millimeters for Toronto, 4 out in Ottawa. Now stay with us here, because coming up we'll have a full look at your national forecast. That's all just ahead. Thanks for tuning into our active weather coverage here on the Weather Network. We'll start off here by taking a look at the current conditions right across the country. Look at Regina, -1, -6 in Calgary, 0 in Winnipeg, and then we're 18 degrees in the city of Toronto. But that's coming with a price right now. Very strong winds out of the southwest, and this has wind warnings in place. And you can see that here. They stretch from London, Ontario, all the way up into North Bay now. So these are some very strong winds associated with that cold front passing through. Now we have Kevin Yard. He's out in the field in Burlington, and have a look at these winds. Yeah, Kevin, you got that exactly right. 18 degrees today when Toronto really should be at about 9. So we are well above seasonal. Tomorrow, though, Saturday, we're back to those seasonal values. Now this here, see that line? This is the cold front that's passing through, and this is what's bringing in some of those very windy conditions. We've seen some wind gusts close to 100 kilometers an hour. In Ripley, Ontario, we've had a roof ripped off the top of a barn. In Bruce County, lots of power outages due to downed cables. Now this here, all of this rain and wind, this is going to transition out into the Atlantic, and that's where we find Nathan Coleman. Thanks, Nate. Yeah, temperatures into the teens in Atlantic Canada for this weekend. Now, this weekend out on the west coast, temperatures are a little cooler, about 9 to 10 degrees, and rain, lots of rain moving through. For the lower Fraser Valley and Metro Vancouver, we do have rainfall warnings in place. We could see about 70 millimeters of rain with this. And as we recap across the country before we leave you here, this is what it looks like this afternoon across the prairies. We saw some mixing throughout the morning hours. That's going to taper into more of a mix in through Winnipeg at 3 degrees. Regina stays at 0. Calgary at 6. Calgary, you're getting into a nice warm-up for this weekend. And I do want to mention, as we push further east, Ottawa will be getting into the showers this afternoon, tapering off in the early afternoon. But as we look at this rain, it continues to move further to the east. And Fredericton, you'll be seeing that. Gander, you could even see some mixing through this afternoon. Feels like a lot just because the wind's really blowing this all around, making it uncomfortable to be outdoors, and driving has been an issue as well. We've seen power outages throughout Bruce County, wind warnings through Ontario, and also special weather statements into Quebec, all associated with the same system. Now, thanks for joining us here. I'm Rachel Schoutsen. We'll take a look at the cloud tops now, and you can see this system as it continues to exit out of Ontario, move through Quebec, and head into the Atlantic. That's going to be the story throughout the day today. So the future radar, you can see southern Ontario will be in the clear by the time we look at the afternoon. We're seeing winds at around 100 kilometers an hour for some places. Those are really the peak winds with this. But into the afternoon, we could see them sort of ease to about 50k. Still going to be quite the windy day in through the south. And as we look ahead into Saturday, a much cooler day. Winds coming out of the northwest. That could actually give us some lake-enhanced rain for the day on Saturday. So the cold front moves through. That's the reason for those very windy conditions. And as we look at some of the temperatures here into this afternoon, Toronto still at 18. Winds winds are at 15, but this is going to really change as we look ahead at Saturday. Back to seasonal, back to around 9 and 10 degrees. Now this afternoon, the rain showers do move out into Atlantic Canada. Montreal by the afternoon, you should be done with this as well into the late afternoon here. And the rain on the BC coast, rainfall warnings are in place here for Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, as well as the lower Fraser Valley. Now before we go, the rain moves into Atlantic Canada. Warm temperatures, that's what we're seeing today and into tomorrow, but it's going to be a big cool down in behind this. Now, thanks for joining us here on the Weather Network. I'm Rachel Schoutsen, and today we're tracking active weather through the east. So as we focus in here on this cold front, this is what's bringing in those extremely gusty conditions throughout Ontario, Quebec, and then that's going to transition into the Atlantic. Ahead of that, well, it's been very warm. We've had days of record heat in through Ontario, and now the Atlantic is starting to feel that as well. Yesterday in Montreal, almost 20 degrees too. So as we look at Toronto here, 18, enjoy that 18 because cooler air is coming. Now, Mark Robinson, he's been out and he's been looking at the elements of this system and the cold front with all the winds. Here's his latest experience. That's for sure, Mark. Now, when we talk about this rain, it's really not a lot of rain, but when we pair it with those winds, makes it a little uncomfortable. So we can see here in through the Maritimes today and in through Saturday, we're really not looking at a whole lot, just scattered showers for you, but the winds will come into play. Up north into Labrador, we're actually seeing snow, sort of a mix, and then that's going to be followed by some rain and then back into some snow. So traveling through this region on your local roads, it's going to be very slippery. Now, as we look ahead at this wind story here, the winds first coming out of the south, that's what's bringing up the temperatures. We were checking in with Nathan, and he said into the afternoon, lots of people are going to be wearing t-shirts, but then we will see that switch, especially to that westerly wind as the cold front comes through. That's going to bring your breezy conditions, and then back to seasonal by the time we look at the end of this weekend. And sorry, in St. John's, we're really not seeing a big warm up for you. Now, on the opposite side, we'll go out to the Pacific here. This is where the rain is coming into play. Lots and lots of rain, so much so that we have rainfall warnings in place for Metro Vancouver and the lower Fraser. And you can see here, it's almost like a bullseye, like a target zone for all of that rain to fall in this region. We could see about 70 millimeters of rain. We're really not going to see a good break in the rainfall until about Monday for the BC South Coast. So let's focus in on this here. You can see all the moisture building up on the coast here. Freezing levels are actually going to rise throughout the day today and then fall again. A cool down coming in through about Saturday evening and into Sunday. So that's when we will see some more snow building for some of the higher elevations in the Rockies and also the coastal mountains as well. Nice warm up coming into play for Alberta though. Calgary is going to be in the teens as we look ahead into Saturday. And for the most part, we are expecting dry weather for this weekend ahead. The weather has been awesome in terms of the temperatures. Winds coming out of the southwest, 18, 20 degrees for many people in through southern Ontario. But now it's the day when everything is about to change. See this line here? This is the cold front right there. That's the cold front that's moving through. And this here, it's bringing in some of those southwesterly, changing to westerly winds, and it's bringing in some very breezy conditions. We're seeing wind gusts to about 100 kilometers an hour. So that's why wind warnings are in place. I'm going to show you that in a second here. But you can see the rain as it moves through. It's moving very fast. We're not talking about a lot of rain with this, but the winds, that's going to be a concern. Places like Bruce County dealing with power outages. In Ripley, Ontario, we've seen a roof ripped off of a barn. And you can see the special weather statements, they are dropping because the wind warnings are replacing them. Some of the wind warnings have dropped. For example, London is no longer in the wind warning, but now they've been issued further east. So Peterborough up to Barry's Bay and into Petawawa, we're seeing the wind warnings here now, and that's because that cold front just continues to advance further to the east. So when we talk about some of these winds out of the southwest, bringing the nice, the warm, pleasant conditions, but then transitioning to a westerly wind, and that's what's going to cool us down. And seasonal temperatures, that's the story coming into play for Ontario into Saturday. So this morning, we'll watch for a slight thunderstorm risk here, but for the most part, we're not looking at any heavy downpours with this. As the rainfall, we could track about 10 millimeters of it for the city of Toronto, 4 over into Ottawa. I want to turn things over now to Cheryl Plouffe. Cheryl, taking a look at the rest of the country, but for most people, I think today might be a little disappointing because these 20 degrees in November, today's the day we're putting an end to that.
Yes, it is coming to an end.
Yeah, Michelle, you got that right. The warmth, many people celebrating with the flip-flops, but right now, 55,000 people without power in Ontario, and that's all due to this, the cold front that's heading through. This here's bringing in very windy conditions. We do have wind warnings in place, rainfall associated with this as well, and then behind this, cooler temperatures on the way. We'll talk more about this coming up, but first, here's Share Your Weather with Nicole Karkic. And we're back. Thanks so much for keeping it here with us on the Weather Network. We've been talking about these wind warnings. We've been telling you that the winds are powerful, but now I want to prove it to you. I want to show you this here. This is scenes out of Wasaga Beach, and you can see this sign here on a local Walmart has actually fallen off, and you can see them doing the repairs here. Now, thankfully, nobody was standing underneath this sign. There was no injuries reported with this, but this really is the power of the winds today, and it's all associated with the cold front that's headed through. So right now, it's really peaking throughout Ontario, the GTA north up towards Barrie, through to Bancroft, now over to Petawawa and Barry's Bay, even as far north as North Bay here. They have been dropped for London, but this continues to just push further to the east. I wouldn't doubt if Kingston and Brockville, again, these warnings will just shift further to the east as this cold front continues to pass through and then drop off to the west. Now, we still have some special weather statements in place as well throughout Ontario, and it's for the winds, it's for the rain. It's really not a big rain story. We're seeing minimal amounts of rain. It really is the winds, and these could be potentially damaging winds with this. And see this line here? That exactly is the cold front as it continues to make its way throughout southern Ontario. And this here, this is what brought the roof off of a barn in Ripley, Ontario. Now, we do have the potential for some thunderstorms as well. Not likely to see very heavy downpours with this, as we're not finding a lot of moisture in the atmosphere here, but it really is the wind story. The wind story is the big one. We're seeing southwesterly winds. That's bringing up the temperatures, now changing to a westerly direction. And unfortunately, the above seasonal trend, that is coming to an end. Now, Cheryl Plouffe joins the show. And Cheryl, I know you have more on the forecast right across the country. This rain transitioning now into Quebec and Atlantic Canada. Well, you know, it feels like a lot just because the wind's really blowing this all around, making it uncomfortable to be outdoors, and driving has been an issue as well. We've seen power outages throughout Bruce County, wind warnings through Ontario, and also special weather statements into Quebec, all associated with the same system. Now, thanks for joining us here. I'm Rachel Schoutsen. We'll take a look at the cloud tops now, and you can see this system as it continues to exit out of Ontario, move through Quebec, and head into the Atlantic. That's going to be the story throughout the day today. So the future radar, you can see southern Ontario will be in the clear by the time we look at the afternoon. We're seeing winds at around 100 kilometers an hour for some places. Those are really the peak winds with this. But into the afternoon, we could see them sort of ease to about 50k. Still going to be quite the windy day in through the south. And as we look ahead into Saturday, a much cooler day. Winds coming out of the northwest. That could actually give us some lake-enhanced rain for the day on Saturday. So the cold front moves through. That's the reason for those very windy conditions. And as we look at some of the temperatures here into this afternoon, Toronto still at 18. Winds are at 15, but this is going to really change as we look ahead at Saturday. Back to seasonal, back to around 9 and 10 degrees. Now, this afternoon, the rain showers do move out into Atlantic Canada. Montreal, by the afternoon, you should be done with this as well into the late afternoon here. And the rain on the BC coast, rainfall warnings are in place here for Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, as well as the lower Fraser Valley. Now, before we go, the rain moves into Atlantic Canada. Warm temperatures, that's what we're seeing today and into tomorrow, but it's going to be a big cool down in behind this. And now we'll take you into your national forecast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Rachel Schoutsen, and we're going to take a look at some long-range trends here because the heat, it has been something in through Ontario. Places like North Bay, it's been 73 years since you have recorded 20 degrees in November, and now you've done it twice, got up to 24 this week. Now, as we look ahead here, the winds now coming out of the west, they're strong winds. We've seen warnings throughout Ontario today, and now the temperatures, well, they're starting to fall. We'll feel that in through this evening, and by the time we look ahead into Saturday, the winds will slightly ease here, but more of a northerly flow, and that's going to bring us back down, and back to seasonal. So we're seeing this continue to move out of the way here, but as this system enters into places like Labrador, it changes the snow over to rain to a mixed freezing rain possible here, and then back into snow behind that. And we'll see that heat as well move into Atlantic Canada. Nathan Coleman was saying today many people will be wearing short sleeves, but then followed by cooler air into next week. Now, the story here out on the BC coast, we have another trough coming into play. We actually have rainfall warnings right now in place for Metro Vancouver and the lower Fraser Valley, and we'll see that trough continue to dig, and it doesn't look to be till about Monday that we'll finally see a break from that rain. What we'll also see is Saturday and through Sunday, freezing levels will fall back down, and that's when we're looking at some more snow for the Rockies and also the coastal mountains. Thanks for joining the Weather Network live this hour. I'm Rachel Schoutsen. Cheryl Plouffe also joining the show as well. I want to talk about our developing stories here and also this powerful cold front that's going throughout southern Ontario, bringing in thousands of people without power and wind gusts close to 100 kilometers an hour. So we'll talk about the wild winds in the east. The temperatures take a dive. Ontario, we're looking at you, and the weekend winter mix. That's all ahead. I want to show you what some of these damaging winds have done here. You can see this picture. This is in Ontario, Lions Head, Ontario. Trees and power lines down. Our roof and chimney have ripped off. Holly Nieringberg posted this on the Weather Network's Facebook. So if you are seeing, well, scenes like this, we've seen a roof ripped off of a barn in Ripley, Ontario. Let us know here at the Weather Network, and that helps us better really understand this weather story and communicate it to so many. We've been telling you that the wind warnings are in place, and you can see it on the radar here, Cheryl. The bulk of that rain has transitioned now mainly out of Ontario, but these winds still very strong.
Yeah.
Thanks for keeping it here with us on the Weather Network. Rachel Schoutsen with you. Cheryl Plouffe also standing by. We are tracking these serious winds that are headed through Ontario right now. So the wild winds in the east, the temperatures take a dive. Thunder Bay, for example, 16 degrees yesterday. Today a forecast high of 5 and a weekend winter mix. Let me take you to Port Colborne, though. Temperatures are warm. They're comfortable, but the winds associated with this cold front coming through, really anything but comfortable here. Wind warnings in place. Wind gusts close to 100 kilometers an hour for some places. We were showing you some pictures earlier throughout the show of some of the damage we've seen in Wasaga Beach. A Walmart sign fell off of the building. Thankfully, no one was hurt here, but you can see these wind warnings. They are widespread throughout Ontario as this cold front just continues to push further to the east. Now, I want to turn things over to you, Cheryl. Cheryl, there's still a lot of other weather happening across the country with the rainfall warnings out in Vancouver and also, well, a cool start to the day across the prairies.
Yeah.
How all of that wind hit. Yeah, your Grandpa Brian from North Bay, I'm agreeing with you there. Now, as we look here at some of the winds, these were the peak winds that we saw on Friday. This wind story has now all settled down as that cold front continued to just push further to the east. But look at some of these winds here. We're talking 75 kilometers an hour. That was recorded at Toronto Pearson. That's very strong winds for that region. Godridge at 71. We had some reports of a roof being completely blown off of a barn in Ripley, Ontario. So these winds, they proved to be damaging. And now the story continues off into Quebec, and this is where we do have special weather statements in place, and this is for that mix of some rain and from the strong winds as well. If it's garbage day today on your street, there's going to be a lot of cleaning up to do in your area. Now, as we look at this system here, as it continues to transition up into Labrador, this is going to bring a messy mix of weather. It's starting off as rain, transitioning back into snow. So really a lot of wintry mix through here, and it could be very dangerous on the roads as we look at this system as well. Now, this is going to be light rain that's moving out of Quebec and through Atlantic Canada. Heavier stuff that's up into Labrador with that mixing. And then overnight tonight, this is going to be a story in through Newfoundland. Now, before I leave you here, let's take a look across the prairies into this afternoon. Calgary at 7. Tomorrow you'll be at 13. Very nice warmth here. Winnipeg will see some mixing. And we do have rainfall warnings. That's in place for the lower Fraser Valley and Metro Vancouver. Lots of rain on the way. We could see about 50 to 80 millimeters of it. Freezing levels right now, they're actually a little high. They are going to be dropping in through Saturday and over into Sunday, and that's when we are going to see some of that snow and some of the accumulation along the BC coastal mountains and through the Rockies as well. This is going to be all rain along the BC coast and for the island and Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. You have rainfall warnings. Now, when we look at this snow here, you can see where it's really going to start to accumulate. Mount Columbia, for example, very high elevation there. Banff as well at 1,400 meters. You could see some mixing more into Saturday night and through till Sunday, as that's when the freezing levels are going to go back down and they'll drop. Now, as we look ahead at this year, lots of rain coming into play for the BC South Coast. We're talking about 50 to 80 millimeters of it, and we're not going to see the sunshine come back into play until about Monday. See that break there? And then another system back through till Tuesday. So I'm saying it's fair game. Vancouver, you are back into that rainy pattern. Now, I want to take you to Ontario now, where active weather is still in play for some snow and strong winds building along the Hudson and the James Bay here. So watching out for some whiteout conditions while driving, and what we're seeing over in Labrador as well, similar situation, but the issue is it's a rain-snow mix. Now, in through Quebec, we're not talking about snow here. We're talking about some very gusty conditions. It's all associated with the cold front. This morning, this cold front went through southern Ontario, and it did do some damage. So very gusty winds at Toronto Pearson. We saw some gusts close to 75 kilometers an hour. That's pretty windy for the GTA. Now, as we look at the system here, you can see by this evening it's well out of Quebec into the Atlantic. See all this mixing up to the north here in through northern Quebec and through to Labrador? That's what's going to be bringing in some pretty treacherous conditions if you are traveling out on this route. So anywhere from Churchill Falls, Labrador City, over to Happy Valley, Goose Bay, this is where the mixing could take place. But the rain showers will be with you. So yes, enjoy the warmth, but you might have to have an umbrella with that as well. But windy. So actually, maybe the umbrella is not going to work too well in this. Now, overnight tonight, that rain transitions out in through Newfoundland. And by the time we look at Saturday here, we are going to see much drier conditions. Saturday, these are your daytime highs out in the Atlantic. Now, stay with us here. We have more on your national forecast, plus your locals. They're up on the 10s. And the conclusion of Angry Planet is coming up. But let's talk about your weather here across the country. What we are going to see throughout the day today, high pressure in place across the prairie provinces, but we are seeing a few flurries, especially throughout southern Saskatchewan and into southern Manitoba. Temperatures cool enough here to sustain the snowflakes. Now, windy, yeah, lots of damaging winds throughout southern Ontario. This system continues to transition in through Quebec and out to Atlantic Canada. And this evening, the rain will still be in Halifax, and these showers will transition into Newfoundland overnight. Okay, now, the end of Angry Planet. Well, I'm glad you could join us here today because, well, scenes like this, yeah, this is what we're looking at throughout southern Ontario as we do have extreme winds in place. Wind warnings well spread throughout southern portions of the province, and I'll update you on that coming up. But first, here's a look at our developing stories. The wild winds in the east, the temperatures take a dive. Yeah, this is a cold front that's coming through, so this above seasonal party into the 20s, that is going to be over soon. And also the weekend winter mix. All of those details are coming up ahead. But first, I want to take you and I want to show you the satellite. And this is what we're doing here. This is a look at the radar. You can see this line just here. That's a line of very heavy downpours and very strong winds coming through. That's the cold front. And this is really what's bringing in some of our most severe weather throughout the day today. This is all going to clear into the afternoon. This is really just a morning story. But we have seen damage with this in Ripley, Ontario, along the shores of Huron, just around King Carden. We had a roof completely ripped off of a barn. And also in the Bruce County region, power lines are down, trees are down as well. So we are dealing with power outages through here, and it's all due to these winds and some heavy downpours as well. Now, I'll show you exactly where the wind warnings are in a second here, but first, here's Mark Robinson. He's out in the field. Well, I'm glad you could join us here today because, well, scenes like this, yeah, this is what we're looking at throughout southern Ontario as we do have extreme winds in place. Wind warnings well spread throughout southern portions of the province, and I'll update you on that coming up. But first, here's a look at our developing stories. The wild winds in the east, the temperatures take a dive. Yeah, this is a cold front that's coming through, so this above seasonal party into the 20s, that is going to be over soon. And also the weekend winter mix. All of those details are coming up ahead. But first, I want to take you and I want to show you the satellite. And this is what we're doing here. This is a look at the radar. You can see this line just here. That's a line of very heavy downpours and very strong winds coming through. That's the cold front. And this is really what's bringing in some of our most severe weather throughout the day today. This is all going to clear into the afternoon. This is really just a morning story. But we have seen damage with this in Ripley, Ontario, along the shores of Huron, just around King Carden. We had a roof completely ripped off of a barn. And also in the Bruce County region, power lines are down, trees are down as well. So we are dealing with power outages through here, and it's all due to these winds and some heavy downpours as well. Now, I'll show you exactly where the wind warnings are in a second here, but first, here's Mark Robinson. He's out in the field. Yeah, Mark is certainly one of a kind. Now, as we look here at some of the wind warnings, you can see they're in place as far south as London. They stretch through the Greater Toronto area up to Barrie and even as far north as Parry Sound and through Killbear Provincial Park. So we're watching out for these winds, especially as the cold front comes through. This really is a story that's happening right now with some of these strong winds. We could see some gusts to about 100 kilometers an hour. Now, we also have special weather statements in place. This is just for the strong winds and heavy rain, and this is widespread throughout southern Ontario, down through the Niagara region as well. And this is going to continue to move further east into Ottawa, into Montreal. This is going to be a quick story for Quebec through this afternoon, southern portions of Quebec. But you can see here, this is a look at some of the estimated rainfall totals throughout the day today. We're really not looking at a whole lot of rain. And by the time we're into the afternoon, well, we'll see this. Toronto's still at 18, but these temperatures are quickly going to fall as we get through the afternoon. Now, this is a look at weather right across the country. And I want to mention we have a new local forecast on the 6s. That will start on Monday.